On November 2nd, 1932, a group of Outback soldiers armed with rifles went to go fight in one of the most consequential wars in Australia's history. I'm talking, of course, about the Great Emu War. The soldiers charged into battle, guns ablazing, ready to take on this great avian atrocity. But did the emus abdicate? No, they did not. And when the smoke had settled, do you know who won the Great Emu War? Those damn birds. One major general even compared the emus to tanks, saying if we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. Those bird-brained soldiers gave up, and the Australian government officially declared the emus the winner. But humanity's focus on war hasn't just impacted our avian adversaries, but human civilization itself. War is rooted in our culture. So much so, in fact, the researcher Conway Henderson writes in his book, Understanding International Law, that in the past 6,000 years alone, over 15,000 different wars have occurred, costing 3.5 billion lives, leaving us with only 300 measly years of peace, sandwiched in the middle. Really cheerful stuff. With war being a part of humanity's past, present, and future, it is clear that man's proclivity for conflict requires a deeper and more thorough understanding. So today, we'll arm ourselves with the knowledge of the history of warfare, next gear up behind the causality of all this fighting, and finally, retreat to the implications of war and how it might impact our future. My history teacher is a grizzled Vietnam War vet, so when I decided to ask him about the Great Emu War, his reaction was foul. But this isn't unusual because anytime I ask him to disclose details of his intriguing military past, he always comes back with the same answer. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. Needless to say, the history of warfare is immense, and fortunately, I'm going to tell you all about it without the threat of murder. War history can be categorized into three main eras: ancient, colonial, and modern. The first well-documented wars took place in ancient Greece. These consisted of sanguinary melee battles fought between hundreds of men. As the BBC states in 2020, the backbone of the Greek army was the hoplite. Hoplites were foot soldiers who fought with long spears and used large round shields for protection. Men used the style of melee combat from the Greek Empire all the way into the 14th century, which brings us into our second era, the colonial age. After thousands of years, it appeared that charging at each other with spears and swords wasn't the most effective way to wage war. During the colonial age, warfare was drastically altered by the introduction of guns into Europe in the 15th century. The presence of firearms rendered melee combat obsolete. According to the Smithsonian Magazine, the average soldier was expected to fire an impressive 3 shots a minute. 4 was exceptional. After the first shot, troops usually took 20 to 30 seconds to reload. These guns allowed for Europeans to colonize most of the world with generally ineffective resistance from the native peoples already living there, because guns simply outmatched spears and bows. This era progressed into the 1840s, until a new era of warfare arose. This final age is classified as the industrial modern period. During this time, innovation of new technology designed for war rapidly progressed. Some prominent inventions include the ironclad in 1862, the tank in 1915, and the war airplane in World War I. But it wasn't until the creation of the atomic bomb in 1945 that humanity realized just how powerful it had become and just how easily it could annihilate itself. We're currently living in this age of warfare, and our obsession with creating weapons to kill each other with has yet to cease. Throughout this speech, I've often asked myself, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Prepare me for the answer to that question. The causes behind why wars are started are extremely complex. However, most can be categorized into two main groups: wars of power and wars of ideology. The first category, power, entails conflict started for territorial and/or economic gain. These types of wars have been present in human society from early civilization all the way until modern day. The 100 Years' War, fought between England and France in the 14th and 15th centuries, was a war for power over who had the right to the French crown. Fast forward a few centuries later, and Britain is still trying to take over the world. Although modern international laws have limited wars of power, they are still found today. As Britannica puts it, although conquest has been outlawed, states sometimes ignore this principle in practice. In 1975, for example, Indonesia invaded and annexed the former Portuguese colony of East Timor, and in 1990, the Iraqi government of Saddam Hussein invaded and attempted to annex Kuwait. Human greed has been responsible for innumerable conflicts, and the desire for power has left a devastating impact on our world. The second main category is ideological warfare. Wars of ideology are fought because of stark differences in an enemy's religion or belief systems. Examples of these conflicts vary throughout history, from the Crusades, scattered across the 11th to 15th centuries, to the Cold War, to cut out communism. But as it turns out, humans aren't the only ones prone to waging war. As the BBC of August 11th, 2019 reports, primatologist Jane Goodall chronicled a war between two rival chimpanzee groups that went on for 4 years. During the Gombe Chimpanzee War, the larger of the two tribes began systematically invading the territory of the smaller group. If the invaders found a rival chimp, they would attack it and leave it to die of its wounds. Eventually, the smaller of the chimp tribe was completely wiped out. Ultimately, this monkey melee may indicate that the causes behind conflict in humans aren't marks of our evolution, but instead something deeply innate. For those of you who adamantly use social media, you may recall to about the third day of 2020 when all was going well until Iranian military general Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, and within hours, a bunch of spontaneous, hysterical millennials had the hashtag World War III trending, and the internet was in pandemonium because people genuinely thought that Donald Trump had started a third world war. That was the first event of a massive chain reaction that created a truly awful year. But could a major global conflict occur in the near future? ABC News of January 18th, 2020 reports that almost half of millennials believe that there will be a World War III in their lifetime. But as our world becomes increasingly run by technology, countries are turning to drones and other forms of cyber warfare. If drones replace humans in attack missions, will we become more ruthless in our war tactics? As The Atlantic puts it in December of 2018, new technologies are making war even more horrific. War is won by breaking an enemy's morale until their ability to resist collapses. In Iraq, the US employed shock and awe, demonstrating overwhelming force while using superior technology and intelligence. If the risk of losing millions of soldiers on foreign soil is non-existent, cyber warfare will probably cause war to be more callous than it has ever been before. But as the Cold War showed us, today's battles no longer need to be fought with troops and invasions. Today's wars are fought in our minds. ABC News of January 6th, 2021 explains that America has been fighting a different type of war for years, the culture war. Because information is so quickly exchanged with the internet, different ideologies are clashing at an extremely fast rate. And our country isn't alone in this fight. The conflict in the UK, France, Germany, and other Western nations show us that digital wars are becoming all too frequent. And sadly, when you look at the acts of terrorism recently on Capitol Hill, it's clear. We're losing. The advent of nuclear weapons and drone strikes have shown us that millions can die by simply pressing a button. As warfare progresses, we need to be extremely cautious and aware of just how precarious our delicate world is. Humans are often under the delusion that they are somehow invincible, but we are actually a very fragile species, and 2020 is a perfect example of that. We must continue to strive for peace no matter what, because in the next 6,000 years, I would like to have more than just 300 years of peace squashed somewhere in the middle.